Hey, what's going on, family? Welcome back to In the Word. I just really wanted to hop on really quickly, not going to hold you guys. If you've been following the podcast or if you've seen this week's podcast, I was talking about the multiple incidents that happened here in the United States where multiple individuals were shot just for making a mistake, whether that was going in the wrong driveway, getting in the wrong car, knocking on the wrong door, or ringing the wrong doorbell. And as I was talking about that, what happened to these individuals and how senseless it was, but not only that, but how we see the Bible talk about these different things, happening in these end times and different ways that we can handle these types of situations if possible, right? But in the midst of me talking on that podcast, I talked a little bit about how, I'm not a fan of watching a lot of news. And I know a lot of times when you say that, some people can be put off by that, especially if there's somebody that watch, a lot of news or turn the news on as soon as they get up and just kind of dive right into it. But I was just making a point that, that's not really for me. I'm not saying that I don't watch any news at all, but it is very rare for me that I watch the news. Most of the time, it's if something's happened in the city that I grew up in, or maybe the city that I live in, or sometimes I just run across different things on the internet, like I did with these stories of these multiple people being shot over making a mistake. But guess what? On the same day that I recorded the podcast, I run across a video where I believe CNN, they talked to Andrew Lester's grandson. If you don't know who Andrew Lester is, he's the older gentleman that shot Ralph Yarl through the glass door for Yarl, ringing his doorbell, ringing the wrong doorbell. He was looking for his siblings, didn't realize he was at the wrong address, ends up getting shot in the forehead and in the arm. But I ran into Andrew Lester's grandson's interview with CNN. And I wanted to share that with you guys because it was confirmation of what I said on the podcast. So I want to share this clip with you guys, and then I'll be right back just to share a few more thoughts with you guys, and I'll let you go. But here's the clip.
Do you believe your grandfather is racist?
I believe he holds racist tendencies. I feel like a lot of people of that generation are caught up in this 24-hour news cycle of fear and paranoia perpetuated by some other news stations. And he was fully into that, sit and watch Fox News all day, every day, blaring. That stuff really kind of reinforces this negative view of minority groups and leads people to be doesn't necessarily lead people to be racist, but it reinforces and galvanizes racist people.
Did your grandfather have a gun or more weapons in the house?
The guns were all over. He had them stashed in some spots and had a big locker full of them. But yeah, he was ready to defend his home, as he would say.
Hey guys, welcome back. As you can see, total confirmation of what I was saying. And if you have not saw that podcast or listened to that podcast, I will leave a link in the description to the YouTube version of the podcast that I just did this week, talking about those incidents, how horrible they were, how sad they were. And if you listen to podcasts on any other podcasting network, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can also find our podcast on those different platforms. The name of the podcast is In the Word Podcast. But for those of you that are here on YouTube, I will put a link in the description to that episode. But yeah, as you can see, total confirmation. This is why we have to be super careful with the news that we take in, the information that we take in. A matter of fact, there's an older podcast episode, and I'll also put this in the description, a link in the description to this podcast. I believe it was episode 17, where I talked about whose information are you dressed in. In other words, who are you listening to? And this particular podcast, it doesn't matter if you're saved, not saved, you have to be very careful of who you are listening to in this day and age. I see it so often on the internet. People they hang on every word that's being said, every video that's being made and recorded, especially if it has a little bit of eerie music to it, people automatically, attach that to being true. They take that at face value. If it's a little bit of eerie music and it sounds a little spooky, they'll hang their hat on it. They won't go and do any research to see if this story is true or if it really happened. And before you know it, it got thousands of shares, is reaching millions of people. And now you have a lie out there that is hard to pull back in. So you got to be very careful, especially with how vast the internet is. Now you got, AI being used and people using that for various things. You got to be super careful, guys, with the information that you take in. And another thing that I see on the internet, and I'm going to let you guys go, is a lot of times, we have individuals on here with agendas, right? You got preachers, you got politicians, you got white supremacists, you got black activists, you got all these different people, online with their agendas. And what often happens, what I see happen is these individuals may post something or talk about something and come to find out, they prematurely talked about it or touched on it, and what they put out to the public, it wasn't true. But here's the problem. Most of the time, they don't come back and say, listen, I messed up. I'm sorry. I reported that story wrong, or I gave you false information. No, why? Because they have agendas. Their pride is too strong. They have these followings and they want these people to continue to listen to them, and they won't come back and be responsible and let you know, listen, I messed up. That wasn't exactly how the story went, so on and so forth. And once again, you got a lie that's just reaching millions of people. And now you got these, you got people out here that's angry, people that are upset, over politics or racism, religion, all these different things. So I just wanted to tell you guys, be very careful with the information that you take in. I'm going to leave a link, two links in the description. One is going to be to the podcast that we just did this past week, just talking about how sad it is that you can be killed nowadays for making a mistake. And I'm also going to leave a link to our podcast number 17, where we talked about whose information are you dressed in, because whoever information you are dressed in, whatever information you are taking in, that is the information that you are going to act out. And if you are not, just constantly on YouTube, you can just go once again on wherever they have podcasts, whatever platforms podcasts are on, and just type in the word podcast, and you can check out that podcast episode. It's number 17, and the podcast episode that we did this week is number 113. It's episode 113. So know that I love you guys. Thank you for taking time out just to hear me for these few minutes, just to hear my heart. But you got to be careful out here, guys. This is why I don't take in a lot of information. I don't listen to a lot of people. And if I do, I try to at least go back and just confirm these stories, or see if there's any truth to these stories. But know that I love you guys. I know I promised I wouldn't keep you long. So until the next time we get together, guys, remember to stay in the word. Shalom.